right, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christophe Levesque. I'm a software architect at AppDirect, and I'm going to talk to you about how AppDirect migrated over and implemented the V2 Cloud Foundry service broker. So before jumping into more detail about the service broker and what we did and where we migrated from and what we migrated to, just a few words about AppDirect for those who might not know about it. So AppDirect is a leading provider of cloud service marketplace and management solutions. We launched in 2009, and we've released several marketplaces throughout the world, including Cloud Foundry, Staples, Deutsche Telekom, etc. So just in a few words, what is a service marketplace? It's really an offering that we give to large companies like Deutsche Telekom, Staples, Telia, and many others who have a user base and who wants to expand and engage their user base by providing them with third-party services that they are distributing. So AppDirect builds a catalog of such applications and is able to distribute applications and services to the users of those companies. So that's the offering from the distributor side. On the other side of the spectrum, and because AppDirect is a multi-sided platform, AppDirect also partners with service providers. So I was mentioning that AppDirect distributes services to the consumers of those companies. Those services are actually built by third party, and we partner with several very cool companies like Redis Lab, ClearDB, New Relic, MySQL, Elephant SQL, to provide services to those marketplaces. So the proposition is for those independent software developer is to integrate to the AppDirect platform and then be able to be distributed through a network of marketplaces in a seamless way. And so how does that fit in with Cloud Foundry? So I'm going to rewind back to a year ago, and I don't know how many people had the chance to attend the 2013 Cloud Foundry conference. But during this conference, we were very excited to announce that we were one of the first service broker for the Pivotal Cloud Foundry deployment. So that meant that when you go to the Pivotal Cloud Foundry and you decide to create a service to connect to your application, be it like MongoDB or MySQL or SendGrid, it actually was going through the AppDirect servers and then being routed to the right service provider. So this was a very exciting time a year ago, and most of the integration that had been done at that time was relying on proprietary APIs that had been developed by Pivotal internally and that were consumed by AppDirect. So everything was working great. It was a great implementation. We were able to provide Cloud Foundry with a catalog of, I think, over 20 applications or 20 services. And basically, this is just a screenshot of the Cloud Foundry Service Marketplace with all the services provided by AppDirect. Now, the trick is that it's been a year since that initial proprietary implementation of a service broker by AppDirect and Pivotal. And the downside was that, as I mentioned, it was proprietary, meaning that it was really restricted to Pivotal. It was not part of any of the open source Cloud Foundry platform or the Cloud Foundry code. So over the last year, Pivotal and the Cloud Foundry team have been doing a tremendous effort of standardizing and open sourcing all the APIs that were involved in this initial release of the service broker. And now, 1 year later, Cloud Foundry has built in its core open source component a service broker that allows any Cloud Foundry deployment to be able to pull a catalog of services from a third-party broker. The Pivotal team has done a great job at documenting these APIs. I'm going to go over this in a bit more detail in a second. And over this last year, AppDirect was able to migrate all the existing code and all the existing accounts and services from that initial implementation to the standard Cloud Foundry implementation of the service broker. which is called V2. So in a very short words, and if you've attended the previous talk, you probably have already a pretty good idea of what services represent, be like databases or services like New Relic and SendGrid. But the service broker is actually composed of what I would say 3 sets of APIs. So the first API that a service broker is going to implement to distribute services is the catalog API. So the catalog API is just a very simple JSON endpoint that is called by Cloud Foundry to say, hey, here's the list of all the services that my broker is distributing. I have a MongoDB with a small plan, a large plan. I have a MySQL service with a small plan, and so on. So with that API, Cloud Foundry is able to read the catalog and populate its internal database with all the services that have been advertised by the broker. Now the second API is the set of service API which are responsible for creating and deleting services in a space. So I'm sure most of you have used the Cloud Foundry command line or have used the Cloud Foundry UI, where you go and decide, hey, I want to create a service. What this does, in turn, regardless of whether it's the command line where you do cf create service, or whether you go through the UI and decide to purchase from the marketplace web page, it always goes through the same API, which is a service API, which is just a simple put to say, this space is creating service for a small Mongo database, for example. And similarly, when you're done with the service, when you don't need to use the database anymore, you're going to delete it. And what this does in turn is that Cloud Foundry sends to the broker a delete HTTP request to delete the service that is no longer needed. And third, the third API that I'm going to mention is also the binding API. So once you actually provision services and provision and deprovision services, you also want to be able to use those services with your application. If you have an application that needs a connection to a database, you're going to need to first provision that service, create your MySQL database, for example, and then you're going to have to generate a set of credentials so that your application can connect to that database. And that action of creating and establishing the connection between the service and the application is called a binding. That's what happens when you do cf bind service, and it asks you, oh, which service do you want to bind, and what application are you binding it to? So these are the 3 main APIs that are part of the service broker, and that have to be implemented in order for a broker to be included in Cloud Foundry. Now, in order for if you have implemented those three APIs successfully, now you have a fully working service provider, service broker. And this service broker is available to any Cloud Foundry instance to be added for the services to be added to the Cloud Foundry marketplace. So adding a service broker to a Cloud Foundry deployment is actually a very, very simple operation. And the Cloud Foundry team has been doing a very amazing work of making it as easy as possible. It's really just one line of command. You do cf add service broker if you're an administrator of the Cloud Foundry deployment. It's going to ask you, oh, what's the URL of the broker you want to import, which is going to host all the services, and what are the credentials to connect to this broker. Once you do this, Cloud Foundry will pull the list of services into its database, and the last step will be just for the administrator of the Cloud Foundry deployment to make those services public for the consumers to use. So now that I mentioned in a few words what a Cloud Foundry service broker is, I'm briefly going to go over how AppDirect migrated over from the initial proprietary implementation that we did a year ago over to the new open source and standard service broker V2. So actually, as I was mentioning, the service team has some very extensive documentation that made it really easy for us to migrate. They have like fully documented payload for both the request, the response, what they're expecting, how it's secured. I'm not going to go over those APIs. They're all like documented on the website. And to be honest, the migration wasn't much of wasn't a very exciting process because the proprietary implementation was already doing most of the heavy lifting of creating services, binding them against the catalog of applications that AppDirect has. So the only operation we had was really mostly changing the format of the API calls. So we had to standardize. So we had to implement like a kind of like a layer next to the V1 implementation of our initial broker implementation that would actually be able to understand both languages, the V1 and the V2. And then for a while, we had both V1 and V2 running, and they would both internally call the exact same code of provisioning services, meaning calling the external service to provision databases, indexing services, and so on. So we had both of those running at the same time. And then once Pivotal was able to migrate over their service to the new API, we were able to just shut down and flip the switch from V1 to V2 very seamlessly. And the whole process of migrating, really, like I'm saying, this is like 1 year ago to now, but actually it took only maybe like 1 or 2 weeks from AppDirect side just to write all the new connectors to plug into the V2 and test that everything was working. And similarly, Pivotal was able to do the transition in just a couple weeks. And then we flipped the switch over from V1 to V2 a few weeks ago. So now if you go to the Pivotal Cloud Foundry and you provision services, everything goes through a V2 broker. So AppDirect is I assume, one of the first largely used service broker. So just a few words on what this means for if you're thinking or if you're about to deploy Cloud Foundry on your infrastructure. So one of the main goals of Cloud Foundry is to make developers' life easier. And deploying Cloud Foundry will enable developers to easily deploy and manage their application. And the first time I saw Cloud Foundry and I was able to just package my application as a WAR file if it's a Java app and just do like CF push and have the app automatically deployed and running on Cloud Foundry with like scalability and visibility on when it's up, when it's down, it's already like enough to have like any developer go like, wow. But now the service broker opens a whole new set of capabilities for Cloud Foundry. So now not only am I able as a developer to create an application and deploy it on the Cloud Foundry infrastructure with just a few clicks or a few comments, but I'm also able to go to Cloud Foundry, choose any kind of service from a wide ecosystem of third-party developers like SendGrid, New Relic, MongoLab, Elasticsearch providers, and be able to get those services from third-party and connect them to my applications. And for a CF implementer, giving access to this ecosystem of services is just as simple as running the one command that I just mentioned earlier of adding a broker to the Cloud Foundry instance. So that was a very quick presentation of the service broker. I think we probably have like a couple minutes left. I don't know if there's any questions, or if everything I said was crystal clear. Yeah. Very good question. So just repeating the question for those audience. So the question is that if I have a service, if I'm a developer of a service, like a database as a service, and I want to integrate my service and distribute it to Cloud Foundry, I have two choices. I can either go directly and implement a service broker and be added directly to a specific CF instance, or I can integrate to AppDirect and be distributed through the service broker, through AppDirect service broker to different deployment. So the question is like, did we think about standardizing the two approach? And so far we haven't really. So the AppDirect marketplace actually serves more use case than Cloud Foundry. So we have a lot of services that are distributed through like a web interface which are not related at all to Cloud Foundry. Like we have a marketplace for Staples, for Comcast. And in those cases, the Cloud Foundry model doesn't always make sense directly. It cannot be directly applied to those marketplaces. So for those, we still need to have like our standard way of distributing services. I guess we could, in a future version, We could think about like trying to simplify or standardize it to make it more seamless to go from one to the other. But I guess for now it's not like so much of a priority. But the other thing is that integrating to AppDirect not only lets you enables a service provider to be distributed to any kind of CloudFoundry deployment, but we can also distribute services to other marketplaces which are not necessarily CloudFoundry. So the question is like, if you are a service provider and you integrate to AppDirect, do you have to do more work to be distributed on multiple marketplaces? And the answer is no. That's really one of the main advantages of one of the main value proposition of AppDirect is that as a service provider, you do a single integration to AppDirect. You now then part of the AppDirect master catalog, and your service can be then redistributed without any change at all through any CloudFoundry marketplace, to Rackspace, to Staples, and any of the marketplace that will be partnering with. So the question is, where are we running the cloud, the service broker? So currently, for information, like AppDirect is deployed. So the service broker is part of the AppDirect application or platform, and this platform is currently running on multiple infrastructure. We are running on Amazon. We're also running on Rackspace, and we have a couple other infrastructures where we're running it. So the question is, were there any impact when we migrated from V1 to V2 on our existing data? So the answer is actually no. There was a very, very seamless migration. All the data was already stored with all the information. So some of the data that needs to be stored by AppDirect when a service is provided or created is the GUID for the service. Who is the service? Which space is this service created in? And all the data was already stored as part of the V1 broker implementation we did a year ago. So when we migrated, that's what I was mentioning. Like it was really just an interface change where the schema of the JSON slightly was changed. We changed the authentication mechanism from OAuth to basic auth. But in terms of data, all the data just stayed exactly the same. And it was really a very seamless transition. All right. I don't know. I think we are getting close to the next speaker. I don't know if there's any other questions, but thank you.